sing the song. But I would like to say just a word about it, of the song, that Louis B. Mayer went to the head of MGM, went to the sneak preview, and he said, cut that out, the song. She's singing in a dirty old barnyard. It's just, it's not proper. And they finally talked him into it. Now, most Hollywood stories are suspect. All the good stories are. But there's several people that were there at the sneak preview, and apparently he was pretty determined to get rid of it. So, at any rate, so I can't show you that, but during the war, they had a program, a radio program that was being all over the world wherever American forces were, and they had well-known singers and comedians and that sort of thing. And she was on that. Of course, she sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but this, of course, isn't from the movie. And what's interesting about it is they did not believe that they could hold your interest for 3 minutes while she sings Over the Rainbow, and so therefore halfway through it they put in, you hear her voice the whole time, but they put in scenes of wartime America that are sort of related in some way or another to the song. Longing to go home. It's a point. So you'll have to bear with that. So I thought that I just put us in the proper mood. It opened in 1939, as you know, was an enormous hit. It didn't make much money. Children only paid 10 cents. But then, as you know, in the 1960s, 50s, they put it on television every year, and it became what it is now. But of course, it was first in black and white. 99% of people saw it in black and white. And I knew a young woman, and she said they went to her grandmother's after they'd seen it several times in black and white to see it because she had color television. And of course, she was stunned by the color. And particularly, she said, you know what Dorothy says, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. He said, I never figured what the joke was. So, at any rate, I just have to like the song, so.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way out
For those who came in late, I'll play it over. Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch, was in over 100 movies. And in her obituary in the New York Times, the first thing it said, she was the witch in Over the Rainbow. She's on the screen 12 minutes. And she was immortalized in that film. So, okay. Thank you. We have 2 minutes, ample time to contemplate our sins. I don't have my hearing aids in, so I'm a bit of a disadvantage.
I said, I like it a little longer than 2 minutes for the sins.
Take longer, 2 minutes.
Well, one of my colleagues, yeah. I have talked to that long, and it's such, it's a long play. I don't think it's that long. Sounds about right.
Yes,
Yeah, let's see what it's, yeah.
Well, we said last time that in March and April 1939, it appeared the world was coming apart. Dictatorships were grabbing places east, left and right, and that Chamberlain stopped appeasement and said, we're going to build a front and we're going to stop these people. That's the most sensible thing to do. That's #1. And Roosevelt sent that letter, which was probably a mistake. It didn't go over very well. Now, but rather than the world coming apart, from May to July, in fact, and into early August, was a relatively quiet period. Hitler seemed to be on as good behavior as you could expect of him during that time. Roosevelt was convinced that his insatiable appetite for expansion would lead to World War fairly soon. This is just a breathing space, and in that he was right. He told, and he thought the only arrow that he had left in his quiver was the neutrality legislation. If he could get that changed so we could sell to one of the 2 belligerents, namely the British and French, and not the Germans, that might be, that's a lever. It might have some influence on international affairs. But the neutrality legislation, which passed in the mid-30s, forbid that. Once war starts, you can't sell to anybody. Under any circumstances, and your ships can't go into the danger zone around England and France in this case. He introduced legislation to modify the neutrality legislation, and they turned him down flat, as we said last time. And he called a bunch of them together, and he said, war is imminent. The war is going to come almost immediately. You're getting historical, Frank. There's no problem, etc. Now, neither was very honest. Roosevelt was using that as a lever to get them to pass it at war as immediate. And they were using theirs. No need to pass it right now because it isn't imminent. War isn't imminent. So now, if you read Time magazine for May, June, July, and the beginning of August, which I did this afternoon. Obviously, I didn't read it, but I glanced through it. It's just it's a wondrous thing. You get a sense of it that the whole Polish-German crisis tends to become a secondary affair. It's pushed further and further back because the Germans demand Danzig, and they demand the corridor. And the Poles say, well, we'll give it to you. And they have negotiations, but it always ends up exactly that way. And it appears that they have stalemated. That for some reason it's just Hitler and the Poles have come to loggerheads, and there seems to be no movement. But there's no military movement, so and people call this a war of nerves. To see who's going to break first. And perhaps that's the best way, perhaps that's the best way to look at it. Now, that the sense, if someone said on August 1st, war will break out in exactly 1 month, people would say that is almost impossible. What is the proof of that? In the 5th of August, Chamberlain dismissed Parliament for 2 months. That's your vacation period, you understand? And most are very eager. And Churchill was very much against it. He thought they should remain in session. And he said the Germans have 2 million men under arms, and they're calling up another 500,000, and this thing is going to blow very soon in his view. But he was voted down, so they didn't foresee. Now that doesn't mean they knew that the war might come in November or something, but at least they didn't see it as an immediate problem. And Roosevelt, on the 17th of August, on the USS Tuscaloosa, a heavy cruiser, took a trip to sea from American territory all the way to Newfoundland. And there were fishing along the way and such, didn't catch anything, but it was foggy there, there were squalls, and there was even some rough sea. But to Roosevelt, there's a great compensation. It's cool. Apparently Washington in the summer is really unbearable. And they did not have air conditioning in the White House. They did in some of the rooms in the White House. But Roosevelt found that old-fashioned air conditioning, something you may remember, was so unpleasant. He actually preferred the heat and big fans to see if they didn't wear with me. So now he's out when you're on sea. It's lovely. He sleeps very well. He slept very well all the time. He sleeps the rocking of the ships and things. He loved the sea. Now he came back a little early. Not clear whether he came back because he had received, of course, he's in immediate communication with Washington, D.C. by radio, whether he received news that the crisis was thickening very rapidly, or because he had some bills that he had to sign that had been passed or not signed. And so he came back and he arrived in D.C. on the 24th. And while he was away, the whole world had radically changed. I mean, it spun on its axis, literally. Now, he knew that, but, there's a lot of difference in being at sea and getting it on the radio and actually being at the heart of things when the news comes in. And what happened was that the Germans and the Russians signed a non-aggression pact with one another. The actual signing is on the 24th, but the announcement was made on the 20th. And I want to show this. The calendar is of some significance. Now, so that what had happened during that period of time, in which there seemed to be a kind of relaxation of the tension was still pretty high, and Hitler wasn't doing anything very much. What was happening, he had, as they say, a much bigger fish to fry. He wanted to make a deal with Stalin. And the head of the American Communist Party asked if they thought there was any possibility of it before it was signed. His name was Earl Browder. And Browder said, there's as much chance of Stalin and Hitler signing the treaty as there is of me being elected the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And that probably pretty much sums up almost everybody's view, because Hitler, the two pillars of his belief that never changed, and one is the destruction of communism, absolute and total. He had destroyed it in Germany, but he thinks that his world mission is to destroy it in the mother country, in Russia itself. Now, that's number one, and he preaches that constantly, and I'm going to pass this around. This is the most famous cartoon that was written. I didn't have time to make an overhead of it, but this is by Lowe, the great Punch cartoonist, and the two dictators, the body in between is Poland. They divided up Poland, and I'll just pass that around. Now, that's one pillar. And Hitler is not a man that changes his view. And the other, of course, is the destruction of world Jewry, which he believes is in has secret plans to take over the world. And to some extent, he conflates them with the Communist Party, because some of the communists were leaders in Russia were in fact Jewish. And so he sees that as part of the conspiracy. I once debated with the head of the American Fascist Party at that time, a man named George Lincoln Rockwell, and he said, all the communist leadership are Jews. I said, I didn't think Stalin was Jewish. He said his wife was. I said, well, you got me there. I can't answer that. So at any rate, those are the two. And that, excuse me, that Stalin, on the other hand, is terrified of Hitler. He's afraid that Hitler is going to attack him to destroy fascism, because fascism is, in his view, the sworn enemy of communism. And to prevent this from happening, for 5 years, he has spent all the diplomatic capital he had trying to get England and France and other countries to join him in an anti-fascist front. They call it the Popular Front. And if they argued, if we all get together, all the anti-fascist states get together, we can prevent Hitler from moving. But the Allies find it so distasteful, even to negotiate with Stalin, and they loathe communism, and so they are not very likely to come in. Well, as we said last time, in April, Chamberlain swallowed hard and said, we are going to make a deal with the communists in Russia to form a popular front against Hitler. It's an amazing thing. They sent the delegates there on the slowest boat they could find. It's sort of symbolic how distasteful they found the whole thing to be. And they sent second-line negotiators, for people for the average citizen who never heard of them. And you'd think a thing of this important, that they would have sent the number one people. Now, Hitler believes that he can entice Stalin, because Stalin is just as cynical as he is. And you know, they're kind of the same of the cloth, and that he can make extravagant promises to Stalin if Stalin will declare neutrality that's all he wants is neutrality when he invades Poland. Because what he fears is if he invades Poland and Russia comes in, and then the English and French declare war on him, he's got a war on two fronts. And a war on two fronts, he doesn't have much confidence in the British and French ability to fight, but nevertheless, a war on two fronts he thinks was the critical mistake of the Kaiser and that loss of the First World War. So what does he offer him? He offers him tentatively all of the areas which were taken away from Imperial Russia after it became a communist state after the First World War. And it's a band of states 800 miles long and 200 miles wide. And Finland, part of Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, 2/5 of Poland, not all of the Poland that they had before the war, but a good portion of Poland they had before the war, and Bessarabia, the easternmost portion of Romania, which was part of the Stalinist, as part of the Imperial Russia. He offers him all of that. Now, he doesn't actually offer them. In diplomatic terms, he says we are disinterested in that. That means you can do anything you want. It's up to you. You want to take it, take it. We're not going to be concerned, with it in any way. So he gives him that, and I want to say that whole thing, what I just said, is somewhat more complicated than but that's basically what he is offering. That's number one. Number two, he offers a very favorable trade pact in which they will send oil and grain and such to him, and he will send high-class machinery, including a warship to them. He didn't send most of it. They sent everything. He didn't send most of it. That's fairly tempting to them. But more important, he says, now he doesn't say this, but this is the implication. If you join me, all I ask of you is to remain neutral. If you join them, they're going to have you fight me, and they're not going to do a damn thing. They're going to sit behind the Maginot Line and do nothing. It's going to be the Russians that suffer with it. So it's neutrality in the one, and you get all these goodies besides, as opposed to fighting their war for them. And now, how they have diplomatic relations, but how do you break the ice? It's really fast. I'm just going to give a couple of examples. The first ice breaking takes place at the diplomatic reception, which is held in most countries on the 1st of the year, January 1st, 1939. And all the diplomats representing all the countries in Germany, and Hitler goes and shakes hands with each other. When he comes to the Russian, he goes by as fast as he can. This time he shook hands, he said, how are the kids? Everything all right here? He chatted with them. Now, that's a signal, you see. That never happened before. But the general public, it wasn't in the newspapers or anything. It wasn't big enough to be in. It was a little thing. We might do a deal. Then Stalin, there are many more of these, but Stalin, the foreign minister, was Litvinov. And Litvinov was a Jew. And he sacked Litvinov, made him the ambassador to the United States, by the way, and put in Molotov, who was not a Jew. And you see, Hitler, that would be a lot more, that would be a lot easier for Hitler to deal with a pure Aryan. Whatever the case may be, there are lots more of those. By mid-August, that it obviously was getting fairly close. Both sides, the Russians were showing real interest, and the Germans, their orders were given anything. Because we're going to attack them later, you see. I mean, Stalin knows that. I mean, that's almost inevitable. There's going to be a war between Germany and Russia at some point. But I'm buying time to build up my forces and everything, and I've got that buffer zone. So those are, that is a factor only if there's a war between them. All right. Now, so it's getting, but this is so secret, no one knows. And the British and French delegates are meeting with Molotov and with military leaders to talk about a military alliance between Russia and Germany. Then he says, we'll resume this tomorrow. He goes to the next room and deals with the Germans. And with the German, Schulenburg, the German minister. So going on, and they have no idea of this. There are few people that have a hint that it was something kind of funny, but only that inner circle, a few dozen people, know what's really going on. On the 19th, Saturday, Stalin sends a letter to Hitler and says, Hitler sent letters to Stalin and says, we're very close, so a couple of things we want change or additional territory we want, something of that sort. And Hitler was quite willing to give him anything. So he orders the ambassador to tell him it's all right. And then on the evening of the 20th, which is Sunday, the Russians announced to a world absolutely thunderstruck that they were going to sign a non-aggression pact with the Germans. It is hard to conceive what it was like when that was it. The German Volksblatt, or the party newspaper, had a special edition, 7-inch high type in red. Now, it hasn't been signed yet. They have said they accepted it, but it hasn't been signed. And Ribbentrop, the foreign minister, flies to Moscow, but he doesn't want to fly across Poland. So he flies around in the Baltic and lands at Königsberg and decides to spend the night there. So he takes a 2-day trip. It's a 1-day trip by plane, but he took a 2-day trip, so he'd be rested when he got there. And he arrives in Moscow, and he's met by an honor guard and by Molotov, and a Russian band crashes out, of all things, Deutschland über alles. You normally play the national anthem. They said they apologized. They would have played the Horst Wessel-Lied, which is the party anthem, but they didn't have the music for it. so anyway, and then of course they play the Internationale, their anthem. And he goes in and everybody's smiling and they're shaking hands with one another. And you wonder what's in the back of their minds, what they're really, really thinking about all this. And it's signed. Now that's on the 24th, but that's a mere technical detail, the actual signing of it. It is the 20th when it is announced that everybody in the world knows. Nobody really knows what it means, or what's going to come of this, because all the territorial things were not announced. That's top secret. Only the fact that they had signed a non-aggression pact, which was to last 10 years. That's the only thing that anyone knows. They suspected there were some other clauses. Now, that sometimes a historical figure, you get a real insight into their personality and such, and when they talk on the telephone and don't realize that it's being recorded or something like that. And you may know that President Roosevelt had a tape recorder, and they recorded something. And my very distinguished colleague, Professor Buteau, was at the library, and he noticed these tapes. He said, what are they? And they said, I don't know. And they investigated, and it turned out only for a short period of time did he have that. And the quality was so poor, that's the reason they stopped it. But Buteau took it to experts, and they were able to clean it up, and enough so that they were able to make a transcript of it. Now, there's nothing, but it's eerie to hear someone talking just completely. He's not president anymore, he's just chatting. And you don't normally hear that. I mean, they're president or dictator or whatever is all the time. This is a case of that with Hitler, it seems to me. That on the 22nd, now he knows it's in the bag now, on the 22nd, he orders the 50 top naval and army officers and a total of 50 Navy and Army leaders and party leaders to come to Berghof, which is his mountain retreat, with a sensational view of snow-capped mountains and everything. And they are to come in mufti. That is, they're not to be in uniform so that it won't cause any comment. And then it comes in sort of in driblets to come there. And so on the 22nd, they're lined up, there are 50 of them, and there are 5 rows of 10 chairs each. And that I may say that Goering, a rather portly man, took Mufti rather too far. He had lederhosen on, and he had a hat with a good feather. They described the whole thing. It really is ludicrous. The costume that he had on. But anyway, and it is made known nobody is to take notes on this. Well, we've got people, 50 people, and the head of the German military secret service, these are the people in charge of the military spies, military intelligence, and that. They call it the Abwehr, which means defense. But that's not what it is. It's like the CIA, I mean, equivalent, except that it's military. And his Admiral Canaris. Canaris secretly is an enemy of Hitler. He wants to get rid of him. But he realizes he has to play the game very carefully, because if he shows too much resistance, he'll be fired. Maybe nothing will happen to him, but he's got a very, very important position that allows him to do all kinds of things. So, but anyway, he could take shorthand, and he took the whole thing down in shorthand. Now, in addition, 3 other people took notes on them. In addition, several more, a few days later, wrote down what they remembered of it. And by comparing all, there's no doubt whatsoever that Canaris it's a 2.5-hour speech, is almost word for word what Hitler said. Now, and I want to just read, this is in the Nuremberg trials. They have the Canaris, and I emphasize that only to point out nobody has ever doubted that these are Hitler's words. If they've been tape recorded, there might be a few changes of one kind, but essentially, this is it. He said, essentially, all depends on me because of my political talents. He was a modest man. Because of my political talent. No one will ever have the confidence of the German people that I have today. And that probably is true. You'll see some pictures in the movies that suggest that probably is true. And therefore, I am a factor of great importance in the world scene, in Germany's destiny, etc. Now, he said, why we are superior to our enemies, the English and the French he's speaking of, our enemies, is because I have an indomitable will. And they are weak and inferior men. They're little worms I saw them in Munich. They're afraid of their shadows. They're worthless. My creation of the greater Germany is a great political achievement. And whether great political Germany was in 1933, a nation of, as we said, 70 million people. They are near civil war. Their economy is near collapse. They're totally disarmed. The Germans call it an in situation. It can't go on much longer. We're going to fall off the cliff. Now, and then 5 years later, 6 years later, he has added 10 million Germans to the state, the Austrians and the Sudeten Germans in Czechoslovakia. He's consolidated the state. He's full employment in Germany. In Germany has become has a very powerful military force. And he said, "I did this." He didn't say this in this speech, but in another speech he said, "I did this, and I was only a mere corporal in the First World War." And this is what I accomplished. And when the speech is quoted, I've seen it, the man says, a sickening speech and bragging and all this sort of thing. He said, but damn it, it's all true. He really did do that. I mean, it is really the most miracle what he had done. Now, he said, but although we are militarily powerful, we are not really ready yet for a long, sustained war. And therefore, what we're going to do, we're going to pick them off one at a time. And that's why that's the importance of the Russian alliance, because that means we'll probably not have a world war. See, that would do one nation after another. Because the army isn't quite ready yet to fight a major world war. He said, although the British and French gave that guarantee to the Poles, I think they probably will not carry out the guarantee. And what they might do, they might break diplomatic relations, which really hurt me. Yeah, I did that. And the other possibility is they might declare an embargo. But Germany, he has created what he calls an autarky. That is, they are self-sufficient. They aren't, but that's the goal was to be self-sufficient, so that a blockade, which would do great damage during the First World War, will not do great damage now. And after the alliance with Russia, he has Russian oil, which Europe, oddly enough, is very short of oil. The only major oil is in Romania, although an independent state, he sells most of his oil in Germany, but now he has some Russian oil also. So I think they probably won't do anything. And I'm going to destroy Poland so fast that they won't have any time to do anything, and then I'll offer them peace. And they're cowards, and they'll take the peace. Presumably, they'll take the peace. He, in fact, did that. They didn't take it, obviously. He, in fact, did offer peace after the conquest of Poland. So then he said the enemy had one hope, and that was Russia. That Russia would join them, and they did not reckon with my strength of purpose. They said it's impossible for him to do this. They didn't realize how far-sighted, this is Hitler, how far-sighted I was in doing this. I have struck that weapon from their hand. And then he said, as regards the conduct of the war, close your hearts to pity. Crush the enemy, every living spark. We must act with the greatest harshness. Now, Canaris had taken this down, and then there were a small group in the out there that agreed with him, and he read Hitler's speech from his shorthand notes, and a man who heard him read the speech said, he seemed utterly horrified, his voice trembled at the monstrous scene which he had been present. That Canaris was just stunned because he read what this apparently meant. There's no stopping this person. The evil that he will do. Now, Roosevelt got back on the 24th. There's a big crisis, and the first thing he did on the Tuscaloosa coming back, he wrote out a proposal to give to the Italian king and to the Chancellor of Germany, Hitler, and to the President of Poland. Now, why the Italian king? Well, there are several reasons. One is that Mussolini had suggested the idea of a conference at the time of the Munich crisis, and that that he felt the king would be more, theoretically, Mussolini worked for the king, that's pure theory, but he would be more likely to take this up. They didn't pay attention to it. And then Hitler, and then the other. And he said, I see two possibilities. One is face-to-face talk, the Germans and the Poles talk face-to-face, and the second is arbitration, in an armed report. This is, you realize that the arrows don't amount to much. They paid attention to it. in reading the diplomatic documents, which I've not done, but I've read people who have read them, what the amazing thing is, the United States is almost never mentioned during the crisis, before the war. It's like we're a cipher, because we are a cipher. We don't have anything to bring to the table. Then he also asked if all of the powers involved in the war would guarantee that it's those involved now, and this is on the 24th, and presumably that it will spread and it would be involved, will all state that they will not bomb open cities. Open cities are cities which are not defended. And each one agreed, with the proviso if all the others agree. Which means that obviously they're just, it's a joke as far as they're concerned. Now, that's about all he can do. By the way, almost all of his cabinet is away. Because, and this is the 24th I'm talking about, because this thing came like a thunderbolt on them. Secretary of Treasury Morgenthau is in, of all places, Norway. The Postmaster General is in France, and Hall is in White Hot Springs, which is in West Virginia. That is ominous. He has tuberculosis. We talked about when he goes there. He's recovering from an attack of tuberculosis. Although that is never admitted at the time. Madam Secretary Perkins driving in the Northeast, I don't know where she is. I mean, it's going to take some time to figure out what her itinerary is and how they can get a hold of it. So most of this is done without the cabinet or secondary people make the decision. All right, now, so during the Hitler's original idea was sign with. Get the thing signed and then attack on the 25th, the next day. And the orders are out and the troops are all moving to their forward station, and one small unit actually crossed the Polish border. It was a firefight with the Poles because they had to send runners out to tell them no. It's not the 25th. It's going to be later. And the question always comes up: why did he do that? And I think the most logical reason is what he decided was, I can ensure that the British and French will not declare war to defend Poland if I offer the Poles very generous terms with provisos that they can't possibly accept. And then I can go to the British and French and say, I gave them everything they wanted. I was as moderate as I could be, and they turned me down flat. What else could I do? Now, the British and French might be cynical about that, might doubt if that's what really happened, but it might give them enough of an excuse not to declare war. So they could say, well, the Poles, we guaranteed them, but I mean, we assumed they would be rational, and they got a fair deal, and they refused to take it. So, and it didn't work. And then on the morning of the 1st, the German forces, early in the morning, the German forces crossed the Polish frontier. German bombers very shortly after that were over Warsaw dropping bombs. It is 10 minutes to 3 o'clock in the morning. The phone rings. Roosevelt, of course, there's a switchboard, and it was his ambassador in France, Bullitt, and Bullitt called him, and we actually have a transcript of it. And the president, I presume, sleepy, said, "Who is this?" He said, "This is Bill Bullitt, Mr. President. Tony Biddle, who was our ambassador in Warsaw, Tony Biddle has just got through to me from Warsaw. And told me that several German divisions are in Poland and the fighting is heavy. And he said there were reports of bombers over Warsaw. And then he was cut off. And he did say also that he tried to get through to the president, but he was unable to get through to the president. Presumably in this situation, the whole telephone system all over Europe is in disarray. Now, Roosevelt said, "Thank you very much," and then he called Hall, who was sick at Silver Springs, the Secretary of War, Secretary of Navy. Wells is number 2 in the State Department, and he is not his press secretary, but the assistant press secretary is also on vacation, and his name was Hassett. The press secretary is Earl. And he was related to the Civil War general, Confederate general, Early, rather remotely related, but he was related. Now, then you got an amazing capacity. If someone called me like that in the middle of the night and said, you know, the whole thing is broken open, the war started, I think I'd get up. I don't think I'd go, hey, go right back to sleep, and got up at 7 o'clock. You know, what could he do? I mean, you know, reports were coming in, but there's really no action he could take. But nevertheless, it does, psychologically, it seems a little odd. Now, that the war started, and now he has some things to actually do. And the first thing that he does is he holds a press conference. And at the press conference, of course, the question of the day is the question of the day is, are we going to be involved in the war? And he said, I hope not. I think I can say I believe we will not be involved in the war. And I know that my administration will take every act to prevent us from being involved in the war. Later, referring back to that, he said, he denied that he said anything except I hope not. It was just a hope. Now, then, that's Sunday, the 3rd, and we should say just a moment of what happened in England, why the invasion was on the 1st, that was Friday, and they declared war on Sunday. And what caused the two-day delay, and very interesting what occurred, that on Friday, Chamberlain had a lot of, he warned Hitler to withdraw your troops from Poland and such, but there's no time limit. That's a meaningless thing. You got to, in all the name, it says if they're not out by so-and-so, we'll do something, they will declare war. There is nothing there. So that doesn't really mean much. And he had a pretty good excuse for doing nothing on Friday, because they've got to evacuate the children. See, they believe that Germany will attack, probably on that day, will attack London. And they estimate the casualties maybe in the tens, maybe in the hundreds of thousands. This is wild exaggeration of what would happen, but that's what they believe. So they decided they'd evacuate the children. Now, this is purely voluntary. School is not in session, but anyone who wishes their child to be evacuated takes him to the school, and the teachers are to report to the school, and then they march them, or take them on buses or whatever, to trains. Every train in England is stopped, every passenger train, and they'll all pour into London, and then the children go on, and then they take them out to what are called safe zones. And at the safe zone, they have already surveyed the people who have extra space. And then what they do is, with the extra space, that you have so much space, you get 3 children. You know who they are, you know nothing about it. So they get to Reading, and they're going to take 400. So they on the train, they dump off 400 there randomly. They try to keep the groups together, but randomly, and then the people who have to take them are there. And someone said it was somewhat like a sale at a big department store and a Roman slave market. They grab little kids who look fairly, respectful and say, I got mine. And it was just chaotic situation. But by the end of the day, they had gotten, mostly out of London, but also out of some of the other large cities, they had taken about 1.5 million young children out. There's a great sociological experiment, as I'm sure most of you are familiar with, because the larger your house, the more likely you're to get children. And therefore, you're going to get, and the children who come, although they're spread out, when you get to the middle class, virtually none of them are taken out. If they want their children evacuated, they take them out themselves, and relatives, or they get a hotel somewhere, and they go. So these tend to be children of the lower socioeconomic type. So there's the two groups have practically never seen one another. Some were absolutely horrified of what they saw. Then all the jokes, and I won't bore you with any of them, except the little kid, he's never seen a cow, and he won't drink the milk. He said, I want milk out of a clean bottle, not out of a dirty old cow. Now, there are at least 300 of those. 2 or 3 of them have actually happened. So, now, you take care of that, and then there's a lot of things you have to do if you're going to go to war. A lot of you have to order the blackout for that night, and you have to call up reserves, et cetera, et cetera. All of that has to be done. So he does that, and most people say it can take a day to do that, and you don't want to declare war, because if you declare war, they're convinced that a few hours later the bombers will come over. Which is very amazing view, that the Germans would not bomb until they were actually at war, but nevertheless, that was the feeling. Most of you have heard this. If you want to read the greatest account of the evacuation of the children, his Evelyn was put out more flags. It is the funniest book I've ever read. I say that, put out more flags, Evelyn Waugh. Proof. I once fell, actually, from there, 18 feet down. And among other things, I broke some ribs. Now, I'm in the hospital room, and a friend of mine brings me glasses, because he figured my glasses were broken, so he only glasses, and he brings me put out more flags. Now, if you've ever had broken ribs, the one thing you don't want to do is laugh. And I started laughing, and the pain was excruciating. And then I stopped, and I picked the book up again, and I started laughing again. It is really a funny book. And as I always say, the publishers only gave me a very small sum. Now, but then on Saturday, people get a horrifying feeling. He's not going to ask Parliament to declare war. Parliament does not declare war. The government declares war in England. But in fact, they declare war. They announce to Parliament, and they have to have, I mean, they wouldn't do it unless they have the vast, overwhelming vote in favor. They don't take the vote with that. So anyway, and he 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, Parliament meets, and he starts talking about there's a possibility that Mussolini is offering negotiations and this sort of thing. They're thunderstruck. That guy's going to try and weasel all of this. And a man from the Labour Party stands, and he said, I'm not prepared to say anything, but he happened to be the leading member of the party that was there, and so I'm obliged to speak. And someone, and a number of people have claimed that they were the one that did it. Well, speak for England. Listen to Harris. He said, I'll speak for the Labour Party. And he said, we made a solemn promise. Our promises, diplomatic, in the next 50 years will be worthless. No one will believe them if we don't do. We've got to be at war. And they went to, a delegation went to Chamberlain and said, if you don't have us in war by noon tomorrow, you will be out of office. No question whatsoever. And so he gave a 3-hour ultimatum that they had to withdraw from troops, which they obviously were going to do. And it ran out at 11 o'clock in the morning. And at that moment, the Prime Minister spoke a very short speech, and he announced that they were at war. A short time later, the King spoke on shortwave radio to the whole empire and said, we are at war. That people in England who are through now remember Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This is referred to by, I did this, I knew a lady, and she was married on, she was married, and had a room with her, they were posh out, and she showed me her wedding picture, and she said, "Do you see anything odd about that?" We all think gas masks. The man carried gas masks and strapped to their, and I noticed it is sort of strange. And she said, well, that was Saturday. She said our honeymoon in Paris was called off. Anyway, now, Roosevelt is aware of this and is much relieved when they declare war, and that's when he decides, because now there is a world war. Now he decides to give the fireside chat. He gives the press conference, etc. And Hitler spoke that day at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 10 o'clock in the morning, to the Reichstag, and he explained that Poland had attacked Germany. The lies are really incredible, and we're just striking back, and then announced that a total war. Purely personal, that Sunday night, that in Burlingame, California, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and my father came in and got my brother and myself off. And we had bathrobes on, and we went in and we listened to the speech. Now, you heard the German in the background, but William L. Shirer was translating the speech and commenting on the speech as he went along. And the one thing I remember, that at one point in the speech, Hitler said, "If anything should happen to me, Goring will take over. If anything happens to Goring," and he goes down this line. And Shirer said, "What an odd thing to say at a time like this." I mean, it seemed, and that stuck in my mind, to some extent. All right, now, so Roosevelt now, and the world is at war, and Roosevelt has made what he considers the appropriate. He's taken the appropriate actions that are available to him, among other things. And a word about the fireside chat, about the fireside chat that evening. It has a huge audience. And he said, "Beware of rumors." It's probably good advice, all kinds of wild rumors going around. And secondly, do not yourself or encourage anyone else to have any wild talk about American expeditionary forces going to Europe. There's going to be one. Now, he doesn't say there's not going to be one, but he says that's not on the table at the present time. And then he said, "I will, in a day or so, be declaring neutrality." That is a diplomatic act. War breaks out, and all parties that are not involved in the war declare that they are neutral. And by so doing, they have certain rights, neutral rights, and they also have certain neutral obligations. And one of the neutral obligations, you have to be neutral, you have to be even-handed between the two warring powers or individual states. Now, that's number one. But also, the Neutrality Act that we had been passed in the mid-30s, the three acts, put certain obligations on him, certain things he had to do. And the first thing he had to declare that a war was on, which is not. And then once he declared that, then he had to draw a very ample line, and no American ship could go through that line. That would be the war zone. That is so that no American ships, the Germans obviously would have submarines out sinking ships in and around England, that no American ship would be sunk, and that they could use that, you could use that, the president could use that as a lever to get us into the war. That's why they passed that. That's number one, and drawing the war zone. So he said, "I declare it." Then he said, this is interesting. I've had my lawyers looking into it. He declared a limited national emergency. And in the First World War, a War Powers Act was passed. And if the president, under the war, and it hadn't been repealed, under the War Powers Act, when the president declares a limited national emergency, that he can issue executive orders in a lot of areas which normally would have to go through Congress. It doesn't give him any power until he issues the orders. That is to say, if he doesn't choose to issue the order, nothing happens. So, and it gives him quite a bit more executive power than the president normally has. Later, he'll have unlimited national emergency, and they got all the lawyers together. As far as they could see, it didn't make any difference at all. They limited the national emergency, gave him the power to do a number of things if he issued an executive order. Now, that I should point out that on Friday, Chamberlain asked Churchill to join the cabinet. They're bitter foes, just because Churchill was right. Everything, dead right. And Churchill accepted that, and Churchill, his loyalty is, this is my prime minister, and I'm thankful to him for giving me this opportunity. Then Roosevelt sent a message to Churchill after he first he just joined the cabinet, then on the 3rd he became the First Lord of the Admiralty, the office of the War Minister, Navy Minister, the job he held in the First World War and was dismissed in 1915 in humiliation and disgrace. And now he's back and was very satisfying. But by the way, the first message that they sent out at 11 o'clock was, were total Germany. We're involved in total war with Germany, and that's the fleet all over the world. Now, Roosevelt sent him a letter and said, if you would like to send me your thoughts about what's going on in this, that, and the other thing, and mutual correspondence between them. Now, the first thing he did, he took it to Chamberlain and said, would you agree with this? And Chamberlain said, yes. And then he shared them with Chamberlain, and Chamberlain wanted to show them in the cabinet if they could. And it's sort of spotty at the beginning, but that is the beginning of a very lengthy correspondence with until Roosevelt's death at the end of the war. 1,800 messages were sent, and many phone conversations also. And that's not an unusual act, but it becomes an unusual act. They're sharing, they have the same feelings about this, and they're sharing those feelings. Roosevelt, of course, can't reveal precisely what his feelings are to the American people, but he can reveal them to Churchill. That is, this is a danger. Now, I just want to conclude by talking about the Athenia. This is a passenger ship, and on the 3rd, just after war was declared, it was 200 miles to the west of the Hebrides, and it was torpedoed by a German submarine. And considerable loss of life, considerable people were saved also, and including some Americans. Now, this is like the Lusitania. Although the Lusitania was bigger and the loss of life was greater, but it was a perfectly innocent ship, and it was torpedoed by the Germans. The Germans said that Churchill sent a British submarine out to do it, to get America into the war. That was not widely believed to be the case. But what interests us is that the ambassador, Joe Kennedy, sent his 22-year-old son, Jack Kennedy, up to handle the whole thing for the Americans when they came in. I don't know if they need medical care, get clothes for him, et cetera, whatever. He sent him up, and people thought he did that very well. And he sent him on a tour, before the war started, a tour of the various embassies to collect information. And he went to Prague. George Kennedy was our ambassador, and sorry, he was not an ambassador, he was a high official, and they assigned him. He said, yeah, some kid, said, wasting my time, I got more things to do. And he turned out, he said, I was very impressed by him. And I had no idea I'd been working for him 20 years later. Anyway, the Athenia, there was no rage in the United States whatsoever. Many Americans said, this is proof positive, we should keep our ships out of those zones. Not the other way around. Now, that in conclusion, that we were the richest nation on earth. We had by far the greatest industrial plant. We were by far the most powerful democratic state in the world. France, a major state, France and England, the only two others. And the American people considered Hitler to be a terrifying monster. But Roosevelt could use almost none of this because he had no army and no Air Force, I may say. And that secondly, the American people were dead set against going to war, 80, 85, 90%. Dead set again. So his hands are pretty much tied. Now, next time we're going to look at what was called the Great Debate, because Roosevelt now introduced the modifications to the Neutrality Act that he wanted. And there was a big debate and such, and a new figure appeared on the political horizon, Charles A. Lindbergh. Take 4.5 minutes. And we'll see some movies. And I have 3 life magazines that from this period. You must understand that both Life and Time, the date on that is Monday. But you get it on the newsstand and in your mailbox on Friday. That's because they want to make it seem more current than it really is. And Life goes to bed the previous Sunday. So on December 7th, the Life magazine doesn't indicate that we have been attacked and are at war. On the December 14th, that they have 2 issues, I have both of them, and one has a star on it, both of them have a star on it, and they have one page, the news of the world. They have one little squib, say, by the way, we're at war with Japan. And then it isn't until the 21st that you get a full issue on the war. If you figure out if they go to bed on Sunday, that the previous Sunday, that was in November, when they started printing. One final comment. When Kennedy was assassinated, they came to this on Friday, and they said to Luce, what should we do? He said, scrap the money. Millions of dollars went down the drain. And they kept 3/4 of it, but the front part. And who would be who would be the person on the cover? Lyndon Johnson. He's the president. And it's perfectly appropriate. It seems odd, but anyway.
Takes more to stand up here.
Hey, how's it going?
Great, yourself?
Good, good.
They had, back it up, put that on the web.
Yeah, he wants to have a version of it for the people that missed it.